Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, Jim. Good to see you. So while we're waiting for File Vault to do its thing, how many here are focused on designing apps, by show of hands? Mobile apps. Okay. What about websites, desktop? Awesome. Anybody doing like strictly desktop apps? A little bit? All right. That's cool. All right. So, I'm going to give you a talk on multi-screen flows. And I apologize to the guys who don't have a ton of familiarity with Framer. I might get a little over the top. I don't want to go crazy here. So stop me if anything doesn't make sense. And if it's too detailed to go into, I'll just tell you that. How about that? So, multi-screen flows. Well, actually, before I get into that, my name's Chris. I work for Disney. We work up here on the 16th floor in this building. JM right there, Mena, where's Ryan? Ryan. These guys are all Disney as well. So, a little about myself. I've been doing design for about 12 years. And most of that's been at startups. As a matter of fact, like, pretty sure Disney is my first real job. So, and I've never really built anything with Framer before working at Disney. Like I had not touched any CoffeeScript. I didn't know what the hell CoffeeScript was. I don't even drink coffee. But you know, I think the employer working for Disney, there's a very high standard for fidelity, right? Like we don't ever show anything that's not like just totally dialed in. We don't want anybody to see anything we don't want them to see the seams, the cracks, right? So for us, I think Framer has been a really good tool because of the amount of fidelity that we can bring to our prototypes. We can show stuff that like, you know, has multiple states and you can drag it this way, and if you don't drag it far enough, it bounces back up, but if you drag it too far, it'll slow it down. Like those are all, there's things you just can't do with things like Flinto and InVision. So why am I talking about multi-screen flows? Well, if you do a quick search on the Facebook group for how to do a multi-screen flow in Framer, everybody here is on the Facebook Framer group, by the way, yeah? Anybody not? Okay, leave. No, go get on the Facebook FramerJS group. It's incredibly helpful, and you guys will get a ton of feedback there. I've learned almost everything I know from that group. Jordan, who's sitting right there in the black shirt, who's still working on his presentation, he has helped me immensely, even today, via Slack, getting some stuff in order for this. But if you do a quick search on the Facebook group for how to do a multi-screen flow, you see a lot of questions like this. Patrick is new to Framer, he's been prototyping for a while, he uses Acture. And if he looks at the examples, he sees that they're all pretty much focused on microinteractions, and that's true. He's wondering, is anybody using these to prototype full products? You know, this is not uncommon. Tobin, has anybody created a full app prototype with Framer yet? One with several screens? Has anybody tried using Framer to build a more complex prototype? Yeah, you can see a pattern here, right? People are really curious about how to create multi-screen flows. Making a couple of screens shouldn't be that hard, right? So it's really not that hard, right? Like I started thinking about the things that Framer affords us, and you know, I've been answering some of those questions on the Facebook group when I have time, and I'm like, you know, I think it's actually pretty straightforward. I think there's a couple of things that we can employ in Framer. One of them is a little property called superlayer. If you guys are not familiar, superlayer is basically a way that when I create a layer, I can say that this layer belongs inside of that layer. That's all it does. Super. It's super. It makes it super. And so when you know, when you assign a super layer, well, let's walk through it. Let's say I create a view. So here's some simple CoffeeScript to just create a basic view. I want it to be the size of the screen, and I want it to be a white background. And in addition to my view, I also want to add a red header, right? So I've got my view, I've got my header. By the way, if you can't tell, I'm not generally the kind to import from Sketch the way that our friend Steven.
Oh, you mean Steven? Yeah.
Yes. I'm not generally one to import from Sketch. So I don't know why. I feel like I don't have full control of the assets or something. I don't know. I'm neurotic. But the fact is like I generally build a lot of my layers out by hand, right? So if I just create these two layers side by side in the code, just like this, and then I've got my view layer, and I want to animate the view into and out of the screen, right? It's a pretty simple thing. If I start moving my view, though, nothing happens with my header. My header stays in place, and that's only the case until I add a super layer. So I can tell my header that its parent is actually that guy up there, my view. And so once I do that and I start manipulating my view, you can see that everything moves together. Since it's now a child of the view, they all move at the same time. Now, in addition to super layer, another thing that's really helpful for this kind of thing is states. So with states, the state machine in Framer, I can create, or I can tell my view that it's got a couple of states. And when I want to animate my view into and out of the screen, I can just give it one of these states, right? I can say, oh, my view just needs to push left. And then the view that I want to come in, that's gonna move to center. So I give, every view that I've got in my prototype a set of states. So that's pretty easy for a simple flow. Like, we've got a button that takes us forward. This guy will move to push left. This guy moves into center. And then when I tap on this button, this guy moves into center, and then this guy moves to push left, and he's off the screen. So that's, we get that side-to-side animation, right? You would write a couple of functions, I think, for each screen. You're gonna need a couple of click handlers to accomplish this. So like when I click on my take a tour button, I'm gonna do exactly what I just said. I'm gonna take the intro slide, the intro view, and I'm gonna push that left, and then I'm gonna take tour step 1, and I'm gonna move that to center. And since I'm moving forward, I'm gonna need a back button. So the back button at the top of the middle screen here, I'm gonna apply a click event here, and it's gonna do the same, well, actually the opposite animation. It's gonna push the current screen right and then bring this guy back to center. Everything making sense so far? Great. The problem becomes, it gets a little exacerbated when you actually have to write out multiple screens and handle all of these individually. Like, that's just for the 3 screens that you saw. Like, what happens if we do this? Oh my God. I mean, not only do you have to write functions to go forward, now you've got to keep track of, like, what was the last screen? I got to figure out which screen to go back to, because these branch now. So if I'm here, I want to go here. If I'm here, I want to go here. But like if I'm here, I want to go back here. Like same with this, I want to go back to this one. So this is a little crazy time. The overhead grows really quickly. But we're not like the first people to deal with this problem, right? I mean, there are such things as apps. They do this all the time. Like I used one on my phone this morning. So how do developers do this? They've got controllers. They've got like really nice, like helpful constructs inside the OS to help them do this. iOS has the UI navigation controller. Android's got something called Fragment Manager. I don't know what the hell Fragment is. But that's what they have to work with. And the nice thing about these controllers is They're going to keep track of which view is current. They're going to keep track of history so that I don't need to think about which was the last screen. They're going to provide built-in transitions, right? I think iOS calls them segues. And they're going to provide events so that I know like when a transition's about to happen and I can do something. Or when a transition's ended and I can do something about that. So we don't have view controllers in Framer. So this thought came to mind. So what I want to demo for you guys real quick is a module that I wrote. Remember, I've only been using this stuff for 7 months, so don't judge me. Let me see here. So here is a Framer prototype that I put together. It's not even really a prototype at the moment. Like, it's just a bunch of screens. Oop, let me just. Ooh. So we have just really simple stuff going on here. I've created just a new background layer, so I've got a white background. That's just something I do standard, like usually at the very top of my prototypes. I've got several views set up. You guys are familiar with the iOS settings screens, I'm sure. So I've got a settings view, I've got a general view, I've got a view for series panel, and a view for a software update panel. Framer is generating everything by the painter's method, right? So things I lay down later are going on top of the things I laid down before. So that's why you see software update. That's the last view I laid down. If we scroll down a little further, you can see I've also added some buttons. These buttons are just invisible layers that are going to sit in my views, each of these screens. So I've got a button to move the general view, a button to move the series view, and a button to move the update view. And these guys, you can see, have super layer properties, and they're all being placed in the views they belong in. So as those views move around, they should go in. And you see I've also got a space for events down here, but I don't actually have anything. There are no events right now. So like I say, very basic prototype at the moment. So what I'm going to do first is import my module that I've written. I'm not going to show you guys how to write the module, that would take way too long. But I'm going to show you how you can use it. So I've already got this module. It's sitting in the background of, where do I?
Straight.
Ah, thank you. It's a string. So now it's a string. My module is in there. I'm not getting errors. But it's not really doing anything. Like just having the module there, it's just that the prototype is now aware that the module exists and it's going to load that code in the background. But in order to actually instantiate the module in this prototype, I'm going to need to do this. New navigation controller. So you can see I'm using the same name everywhere. I'm just going to shorten it to VNC so that I can write this shorthand without having to write the view navigation control every time. So again, nothing's happened. I've just created this VNC object and we don't see anything. That's fine. The real magic doesn't actually start happening until we tell our layers that they should belong to the view controller. We're doing that with a super layer. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that all of these guys know that view navigation controller is their parent. You'll notice that I'm no longer seeing the update view anymore, and that's because you see there I've got a name. says initial view for view settings. Just by having that name there, my module knows which of these screens it should present first. So that's, I mean, name's a property you can use on any layer. But this particular name is the one that this module is looking for. So it's presenting the right view first. Now I'm going to need to set up some events. So like I said, I've already got my buttons here. You can see they're all created. So I'm going to attach an event to my general button. And I want to say on events.click. So when a click happens, I want you to tell the view controller to transition. And the view that I want it to transition to is my general view. So watch this. I click on general. Transitions. If I click on back, it goes back. I didn't have to tell it what the history was. I didn't have to tell it really anything. I didn't even have to give it like a transition, right? All that stuff's in there. That's the point of a view controller. It's to make all of that stuff like the Ron Popeil set it and forget it, right? Like I don't need to think about it anymore. So that's just one button, right? Let me just do this real quickly. So for the button for Siri, we want to say on events.click, and we want the transition, and the one we want to bring back is the Siri view. So now if I go general Siri, oh, look at that. And look, it takes me back right through the same path that I took. So in the background there, the module is keeping track of all the screens that I'm viewing. And as I move from screen to screen to screen, it's just adding them all to this array that gets bigger and bigger in the background. And when I go back, it starts knocking the last piece off that array. The array gets shorter. So you can create branching flows really, really easily. If I want to do the update button, click. And you know, another thing I didn't have to do, I didn't have to tell it, you know, states which, I didn't have to tell it which you know, side to be on. Like I didn't have to define any of that. So now I've got, I want to bring back view update when I click on button update. So general, software update, there's the update view. I can jump back over to the Siri view, back to general, back to settings. Awesome. So all of those lines of code that you saw that get like really, really hairy for every view, it's now just 2 lines of code for each view you want to bring in. And the back stuff is all handled for you. But what if we want different animations? What if we want this guy to go up? And we want Siri to come in from the right. Wait, she's gonna come in from the right. Let's make her come in from the bottom. So, if I click on general, look at that. Oh, it's a totally different transition. Siri, she comes in from the bottom. It's that easy. I didn't have to write any of those states. So one of the things that I do want to add is right now it's not keeping track of the history of the kind of transition you use, so it's always going back. But we'll fix that. This is 1.0. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys today. I'm going to make this module available on GitHub tonight so that you guys can start using it in your projects, because this saved me an incredible amount of time. Now all you need to do is drop in the view controller, tell your layers that they need to belong to this view controller, and that's it. As a matter of fact, even if I want to do something a little bit custom, like let's say I want to change the way that this thing animates, I can say animation options equals, let's set a curve here. Right, and so now when I do my transition, ooh, things get real. It's pretty awesome. So just by setting one property, we can really change the feel of the transitions. Another thing I want to do with this module is allow you to specify a custom state for coming in and moving out. So that way you could do things like twists and fades, all kinds of stuff that's beyond just pushing in one direction. So that's all I got. Questions?
Question: is there an easy way to know where your y-axis is? Is it from Sketch?
Oh, you should show where the x and y-axis.
Yeah. So yes. So the origin points for coordinates here in prototype, or I'm sorry, in Framer, start from the top left there. And top left of the view is 0, 0. When you move this direction, we go to positive, and we move back this direction, we go to negatives.
So when you use a super layer, it's the x and y within that super layer. So
This view to be part of the super layer, its coordinates are now relative to the origin of the super layer. Does that make sense? It's like having a parent object in HTML, right? Like.
So yeah. So say that one layer is 100 pixels in and 100 down. It's gonna.
It's a great line.
Yeah, go ahead and do that.
So the concept is like if you've got an object, right, that sits here,
yeah.
and it doesn't take up the entire view, and then you create another object, and you say that this is going to be a super layer. This guy here is the super layer. So my object, when I create it, my new layer is going to be like right here. It's going to be at 0, 0. Right? But if I tell it I want to move it by 20, 20 pixels, it's going to come in right down here. If I set my like x and y to 20, right? So the positioning is always relative to the super layer.
Is there an easy way to find out, like where, for example, you have general? Is there an easy way to find out where your y-axis is?
Look, I can actually, using the layer inspector here, there's this nifty little utility that they added to the last version of Framer, where if I just hover over each of the layers, it'll show me where they are in space on the canvas. And so you can see there, it's got well, maybe you can't see, but it's got an x of 0 and a y of 40, and you can see its width and height. So it's kind of like HTML inspection a little bit. Jordan.
Oh, I wasn't quite following how you have like events on your back, going back.
So that is part of the module. The module is actually doing that for us. And so let me show you, if I want to say this, if I want to say that the general view, like so when I tap here, if I want to like remove this back button because I don't actually want that functionality or my design doesn't have a back button there, this is another function that we can do. We can say view general back button equals false. So when I reload the prototype, I go to general. Oh. I noticed how Jordan's covering his mouth with his hand. He and I were working on this just like minutes before this. So you're right. You did make it a method as a parameter, right? That's right. So it's actually going to be this remove back button, and the view that we want to that we don't want the back button on is view general. So a little syntax error. So now if I click, there is no back button.
So is the location of the back button hard-coded or what?
It is currently hard-coded, but I'm going to make that into an option before I publish this, because I mean you're going to have customization in that respect. Not everybody's back buttons are where the iOS back buttons are.
You know, I found the previous variations remove the back button.
Yeah.
What's that?
I found the previous.
The last way that I removed the back button?
I found that much more intuitive.
Yeah.
Than asking the VNC to remove the back button from a view. I mean, I guess it could pass in an array, maybe that makes it easier now.
Yeah. That's a good point. That's why this is going on GitHub, because I need feedback like that.
And you could do this within view creation, like view general, and you have super layer VNC, just say back button false.
Yeah.
You do that in view creation.
That would be great.
I like that better than.
Maybe we should talk. Maybe you can help me stop taking up so much of Jordan's time.
Why, I saw that a couple of times. Why do you have to put the view control into brackets when you require the module?
You know, that's a technique that I've always used, and I don't remember exactly why I'm doing
Is that
it.
a CoffeeScript thing? Does it create an object?
Jordan, can you answer that one? Why are we putting the view navigation controller in curly brackets? I don't recall what the difference was between up here.
When you require a module,
When we do the require.
you put the object you want to require in, or that's thing into brackets. But
it's like a shorthand, so you don't have to say.
I think without them, I would have to say like view navigation controller dot and then whatever the class name is. But with them, I don't have to do that. Is that right?
It's letting you take the name of the what you named your class in your module as also the name of the variable that it's letting you pass it over like cleanly without having to rename it every step.
I'm gonna need to get you a better answer on that.
All I know is I like it a lot better than the way I was using it.
Yeah, it was a little, I'll need to dig up one of the prototypes that I did before I started using this method, and then I'll be able to tell you what it does. Any other questions?
Is it possible to add like a swipe to share the previous?
I would love to do that. That's a great idea.
Add it in, dude.
I love this community. Any other questions? All right, thanks guys.